Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This week's guest is Tom Bross. And Tom, if you are listening and or watching this, I would like to apologize because I kept calling you Tim. I'm so sorry about that, and forgive me. This was a great conversation. He sent me his book, and I listened to about an hour of it, and an hour in, I was like, I have to get this guy on the podcast. Have to listen to this story. I had to hear what he has to say. And it was a great conversation. Very kind-hearted guy. Super cool. Laughed a lot, and we had a great conversation. And I want to thank Tom for coming on the episode and coming on the podcast. And I hope you all enjoy this episode. I'll see you on the next one. I gotta find this place, gotta get away. I can see myself spending all my days, wasting all my time lying in the shade with you. Come away for a year. Cast, thank you for being here. Tom.
Yeah.
Why do I keep saying Tim?
I don't know, but it happens a lot.
Oh, does it really?
I got a very short but hard to comprehend last name for a lot of people. It's Bross.
Bross,
but
yeah.
It usually be pronounced Bros.
Bros.
But I get mail that's Tom Broth.
Yeah.
Or Tom Brossier. So
I even got your name written down here. I really do apologize for that.
No worries.
So, well, hang on a sec here. Let me pull some notes up. So I don't screw it up again. Because it has been that kind of a week so far. Where are you presiding at right now?
Spokane Valley, Washington.
Nice.
So we're on the eastern side of the state.
How's the weather up there?
Really hot today. Jesse came up from California, and I think it was 102 today. So it's kind of unusually hot for this neck of the woods, but we got a few more hot days, and then it doesn't cool off till he goes home.
How is the humidity up there?
No, that's usually not a factor. I do remember the humidity from like my Ohio days.
Yeah, go Buckeyes.
Yeah. I'm not built for humidity. I have the sweat glands of a gladiator, actually, and I get frothy, and people are like, "Are you gonna die?" And I'm like, "No, I just got a lot."
Yeah, being out here in Denver, it is so nice because it gets up to 100, and they're like, "It's so hot," and I'm like, "There's no humidity."
Could be worse.
Yeah. Take the humidity. So, Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
I was listening to your book, and within the first hour, I had a lot to ask and a lot I needed to unpack. And my first note was sitting around smoking weed with your mom was the first thing that my first question was, when you look back on it, how crazy was it to be doing that with your mother?
It's a really good question. So you got to kind of time warp yourself back to that was the early 70s. And it's almost like, it was a different culture back then. Parents were looser with their kids than they are now. Mm-hmm. I don't think the term helicopter mom existed. My mom happened to be a big fan of pot and less of a fan of alcohol, and sort of steered us in that direction. Like, if you're going to party, smoke weed, because you'll probably do better than getting in one of your friends' cars and having them drive drunk. And she kind of wanted to host the parties at the house, and she wanted to sample our weed to make sure it wasn't too strong. So I got kind of used to it being in the house and it being smoked regularly. At first, I was like, I'm not going to partake. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to keep my brain in good shape.
Yeah.
But in my family, taking your first hit of weed is like a rite of passage. It's better than your first home run or catching your first fish. So eventually I caved in and got stoned. And I remember I practically got a standing ovation. And then I was disappointed. I was like, well, how come the walls aren't melting? And how come I can still function.
Yeah.
And I was like, gosh, getting high is highly overrated. But then I learned to feel the nuances, and then
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point where I really liked it and continued doing it on a regular basis. I think what's shocking about that first part is my little brother, Alex, who's just supposed to be passing the joint in the bus on our way to San Anselmo, is sneaking hits. And that kind of, made me mad. He's my little brother. He shouldn't be doing that. But everybody just had a laissez-faire attitude, like, well, the rules are kind of soft in the bus. We're on a road trip, you know, just look the other way. And so that's kind of what I did, like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. It it seems to be a correlation. Like I always look back, like I'll look back and I'll see like my grandfather was a veterinarian. Then my dad kind of took the party scene a little bit, and then now like my brother is he works in customer, or he used to work in customer service, but he works for home and does all the computer stuff and whatnot. And then
Hmm.
I see like strict parent, loose kid, strict
Yeah.
grandchild. You know what I mean? Like I see
Yeah,
that
there's something.
correlation.
Yeah, definitely. We started out really, really straight. I got a good picture I want to share with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Back in Cincinnati, um, we were the first family to take the oral vaccination.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, look at that.
Uh, this was in the Cincinnati Enquirer in about 19.
Wow.
And that's Dr. Saban. That's my grandma. That's me down at the bottom reaching for another sugar cube.
Uh-huh.
So to me, this is kind of like picture proof. I mean, we were like the all-American family,
Oh
right?
wow.
And then my parents got divorced.
Yeah.
She was having an affair with the next door neighbor. He ended up leaving his 5 kids behind, and they met in San Francisco, where my mom's best friend was living at the time. And so we were just uprooted from Ohio. They had worked out a parenting plan and everything, but she just said, no, I'm going to California. And so we didn't see my dad that much after that because he ended up moving to the opposite coast to Marblehead, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
This foundation where we were really straight.
Yeah.
And then the guy she married was an asshole. He was just a really uptight, straight, cold German, super intelligent, but no heart for kids. So we never felt like we were able to bond with him. We never called him dad. We never called him, we just called him John. And he was pretty mean to
Mm-hmm.
kids, very mean to kids. He's a dick. But after she divorced John, she was allowed to fully embrace her hippiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things really accelerated and we got the bus and,
So when was the point where your mom said, was it just a certain circumstance in her life that she just wanted to go full hippie? Or was it kind of like always just this little underlining thing that's like always crept up and just got into her mind?
So I'm really fortunate to have a lot of stuff from the past. What I was able to gather in letters and correspondence with my dad and other people was that she had a hippie side to her.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Beat movement back then. And there was a place in Cincinnati called the Blind Lemon,
Mm-hmm.
where people would get up on an open mic and play a recorder, or they recite poetry, or they do whatever. And, you snap for approval in the audience. So Dad said she started taking trips there, and that it filled her head with crazy ideas. I always wondered why my mom left Cincinnati, because she had very well-off parents.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather had his own car selling place. He was a used car salesman with a 4th grade education. But he was, they had a big piece of property. They had horse lessons as a kid. They had a butler. They had a cook. They had a driver. And to me, my young mind, I was like, why didn't you just stick with the money? What drove you to want to lead such a different life? Of course, I learned about astrology along the way because that was kind of cool for the hippies.
Mm-hmm.
And she's an Aries, April 15th. And I think she was just like, the proverbial hippie child who wanted a different life than what was conventionally accepted. She probably never wanted to have so many kids, but that's just what you did back then. You just knocked out children. And so suddenly she has all these kids, but she feels like she's not really leading her own life. So I think she felt like entitled to have some of her own freedom. And in some ways, there were some good lessons that came out of that for us kids. We grew up to be really independent and self-sufficient at a very early age. But it was a double-edged sword. There were also no boundaries. And so, we were able to get away with a lot of shit.
Mm-hmm. So, quick question. Do you go back to Cincinnati at all?
I have some family back there. They don't have kids, so I haven't been back there. I've been back to my dad's stomping ground where he grew up in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. I visited Cincinnati a couple times, but it's just been for work, and I really wasn't able to go back to see where my mom's farm was. We Google Earthed to find out the house I lived in when I was born. Seeing that on Narbonne Court was a real trip. My sister tripped out on that too. She's like, "That's the house we went to? That's where we lived?" I'm like, yeah, that's where it all started.
Mm-hmm. So my next question, and it kind of sprung up at me when I was listening, and why was Charlie a person that made you just happy to see him?
Charlie, my mom had a lot of boyfriends. I was like, it's like the dating game, or let's make a deal. And I was like, I'll take the box. She just was very attractive, always got attention from men. And most of the men just wanted her. Mm-hmm. And when they found out she had all these kids, they didn't pay us any attention. But Charlie was different because right away, he was like a big kid himself. And he loved each of her kids and engaged conversationally with us, took us out to play catch, play a little softball in the park. He was just more involved with the kids. Plus, he was like such a dorky, funny guy. He had a great sense of humor, and he was a musician and a producer. So he was really into the music scene, and he was really easy to fall in love with because I think he loved us first.
Mm-hmm. It helps. It helps when you're going through that kind of thing to like actually have a foundation of something, mm-hmm. no matter what it is.
Yeah.
How long did you live with your godparents for?
So it's weird because things like trips and neighborhood gossip used to be covered in the paper. I've got newspaper clippings from Cincinnati that announced that my mother is taking a combined Valentine's birthday gift and bringing her, at that time it was 3 kids, to Germany to visit her best friend that we ended up moving in San Francisco, in Germany, where her husband was stationed. Mm-hmm. So they were having marital problems then, but that was the way it was sort of announced, like, oh, he's giving her this gift. And then they think they tried to maybe work it out because they had one more baby. Again, it'll help the scene. So we lived with them overseas for about 3 months. And then when they moved and resettled in San Francisco, right across the street from the church, I'm getting mixed up here, Castro Street, they lived on. Anyway, we moved into an old apartment and lived with them probably for only a few months. And then I was too young to know exactly what was going on. The next thing I knew, we had our own apartment and John was living with us. I never really got introduced. It just happened. Like, it can happen when you're 4 or 5 years old. And it just was a sudden change. He was there. There were tons of rules in the house. And suddenly we couldn't do anything right to please him. We got whipped with his black belt. Mm-hmm. It was just pretty severe. And they lasted a few years. I think they were married for 5 years. And then more and more of my mom's hippiness was leaking through. And as their marriage was falling apart, he didn't care. He let her start, getting into crystals and harmonic convergences. And reading trippy books and believing in pyramid power. All these things would have just been, out of the question 5 years ago. But he had come to a point where he was like, yeah, it's probably not going to work anyway. And so we watched her just sort of get a little more hippied out. And then what happened was my sister and I got sent away for the summer, and we stayed with my dad in Marblehead, Massachusetts. And my other sisters went to stay with grandma and grandpa in Cincinnati. And my littlest brother stayed with his dad, my stepdad, in Sacramento. He had been having an affair with his secretary named Mo. And so they were already living together. My mom was like, I need a break. And we're like, but we're gone at school all day. I need a break. So she sent us all over the country. And when we got back, she had been befriended by a woman named Donna Rao, who's an important character in the book, because she really accelerated my mom's transition. And she was like a chip off Donna Rao's shoulder, giant shoulder. Donna Rao was big in every way. And my mom was just like her. She was wearing the Birkenstocks. They smelled like patchouli oil.
Hippies and that oil. Hippies and that oil.
What is the deal?
I know. I hear so many jokes about hippies and patchouli oil, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
I hear it's
very deep, but that smell has that way of just zeroing you back to a specific time. And so I have a lot of strong memories. It also reminds me of Whole Earth Day in Davis, because this was like this big thing that would happen outside on the quad, and there was just a ton of weed being smoked, but the smell of patchouli oil overpowered it.
Oof, man. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're going from San Francisco to overseas, when your mom told you that you were going there, what was your first thought? Because it was just like,
well, to be honest, I was excited. So I'm kind of born with my dad's travel gene. He turned out to be a freelance travel writer and photographer. He published over 1,000 articles. I think he wanted the freedom, to be honest with you, to live that lifestyle where he could get a call and they'd say, Tom, we need someone to fly to Iceland. There's a story that needs to be written. And he wasn't tied down by family obligations. Mm-hmm. I wanted to travel so bad. The thought of getting on an airplane and flying all the way across the United States, I was overjoyed, but I didn't exactly want my mom to know. So I kind of acted, this sucks. But in reality, I was looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. And I still love to travel to this day. I'll go anywhere.
Did you need a passport back then, or was the TSA really lax?
Oh, so the trip overseas, my mom got one picture, and then it's got the 3 kids below her, like a group. And I don't think kids needed passports because we were too young. She might have had to take our birth certificates. Yeah. But that was her passport photo. Mm-hmm. And, that's back when we looked all straight and regular.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't any questions, like just, all right, get on the plane.
I was too young to know we were going to Germany. My mom said, oh, yeah, you were speaking German while you were learning English. But I really wasn't there long enough to have any memories. My world's kind of black and white with Cincinnati, Ohio. A few memories of my my grandpa, because he smelled like wintergreen lifesavers, which he showed us can spark in the dark. You crunch them up and they will spark in a dark room.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then he was a practical joker, too. Everybody smoked back then. They smoked Raleigh cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And he would say, I want you to look into my eyes. I'm going to blow cigarette smoke out my ear, but you have to look into my eyes the whole time. And then he'd, sneak his cigarette around and get closer and closer to your arm until you flinch.
Oh.
And despite his penchant for wanting to torture little kids, he had like Jesus-like charisma. Everybody loved my grandpa. Mm-hmm. So after Molly and I were in Marblehead, we caught up with our sisters in Cincinnati for a while. And then her and I flew up to meet my dad's parents in Milwaukee. And that was a trip because, there were Republican, conservative, Catholic, church-going. My dad's sister is actually a nun, or was a nun for 25 years. So they're rooted in that Midwest, this is the way it should be. And I invited her to come visit us in California at the end of the trip. And she said, why would we want to go there? It's just full of a bunch of weirdos. I think Florida might have eclipsed California in that regard now.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but Grandma, we live there. And she said, oh, we'll have you come see us before we go to California, you know.
Like, well, hey, to
Okay,
each his own.
I'll fly again. I'll do it.
Yeah, go for it. Flying, I do like flying. My favorite part of flying is the takeoff.
Yeah, it's a rush.
Yeah, there just sucks you right back in your seat like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
Um,
used to be a big deal. Remember when you got dressed up and you could go pick people up at the gate? And even if you were picking someone up, it was kind of it wasn't like going to the Greyhound station. It was like nice. And
you could have a cocktail with the pilots,
yeah,
30 minutes before your plane.
just
Yeah.
kind of transitioned into it's basically Greyhound with wings now.
Yeah, it is. Um, so when you were getting in the bus, getting out of the bus that your mom got, over time, you did it so many times. How long did you stay in one spot? Like, was there a point that you didn't even get your boxes unpacked and it's like, hey, we're out
Yeah.
again?
So we were like gypsies, and she was kind of
Yeah.
proud of that term. It was like, yeah, gypsies are bitching. They're like old school hippies. Um, the pro side of it is when it was time to go off to college, I knew how to pack all my stuff. I knew how to do my own laundry. I knew how to cook. I knew how to get to school. I knew how to do everything. I was a self-sufficient person. The bad part of that is just, you miss out on some of the things. Doing things like playing Little League and stuff, that was just out of the question because that would require parental assistance. And
Yeah.
my mom, she had her driver's license when she turned 16. She was given a new car for her 16th birthday, like a Thunderbird convertible or something.
Oh, nice.
So nice wheels. But then her boyfriend, whose name was Whitey, was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. And she let go of her license at that point and said, I'll never drive again. And she never did, which was part of the reason all these different guys who were driving our bus pissed me off. I'm like, why don't you just get your own license and you can take us to school or you can take us somewhere and you don't have to rely on all these other guys. And then the bus was also a love-hate relationship too. This thing was the color of screaming yellow zonkers. It was just super. It looked like it had bell-bottom jeans on because it had these flares around the chrome hubcaps and had chrome bumper, and you could not miss it. And honestly, as a little kid, it was like a little fort on wheels. And I was like, this thing is cool, but I didn't want any of my friends to see me in it because I was pretending to be the smart kid at school. I was getting straight A's, and at school there were some rules and ways to measure success, and I was like killing it at school. So I kept the bus a secret from my friends. I would just duck, in town. I'd be like, as long as nobody sees me in it, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it was insane to me that your mother thought that you were wanting to stay with someone you wanted when, you know what I mean? When you wanted to stay with somebody else.
Which part is that? I'm not sure what you mean.
She wanted you to stay with, what was his name? It was around the time of the moving into the garage, I believe.
Oh, Cliff's Garage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book, it opens with, it starts in 1996, and I'm on my way to go see my shrink. And the first visit at the shrink, I didn't open up. I'm like, this is a bunch of bullshit. Talking about shit doesn't. So the reader really doesn't know why I'm at the shrink. I really don't give that away until book 2, or the very end of book 1. And I want to reveal that now. I want people to read the book.
Plug anything.
Turn into books. This is backwards.
Where did you come up with the title?
It's in the book.
Okay.
You got to read it. It's covered in the title. This is the second book.
Okay.
Third book, subtitled Wheel in the Sky. And
okay.
It's kind of a Charlie story tied to that one. But I forgot my train of thought, my thought of trains.
Moving into the garage.
Okay. So it starts in 1996. I'm seeing a shrink. First time, I don't really talk. Second time I go there, she's like, talk about anything. Just talk about your family. And I'm like, oh, where would I even start? So a significant event that happened in 1974 came to mind. And then I kind of went into a Wayne's World thing where I'm like, And I'm just kind of back in time. So I'm writing it not as a, as a 13-year-old or 12-year-old, but as an adult who's telling their shrink what went down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm using adult language, but I'm remembering all the stuff that happened. We moved in with our God family in San Anselmo. We had like really cool neighbors. Honey Bruce, who was married to Lenny Bruce. They knew all the musicians and drug dealers in town, including Sly and the Family Stone. And so to me, from Little Davis to the Hollow in San Anselmo was like Hollywood. I was like, this is awesome. I didn't know hippies could be rich and drive BMWs and, work at newspapers and magazines. I was just kind of blown away. Something happened between my mom and her best friend, Peggy, and suddenly Charlie was there and Mom picking us each up out of school. So we're like, what's going on? What's going on? And she's like, you're going to be so happy to hear the news. We're moving back to Davis. And my older sisters were like elated. My younger sister was like, awesome. My little brother was like, I don't care. He doesn't know what's going on. He's pretty young. I was just starting to, like San Anselmo. And I was like, I don't want to leave. This place is awesome. This is the nicest house we ever lived in. We were living with our God family. So we each had our own built-in playmate, somebody our age to hang out with, introduce us to their friends at school. It was pretty nice. But she goes, no, everybody's coming back to Davis. And we didn't have a place to live. We were just renting a house prior to leaving. And so I started to freak out. My mom was like, it's going to be so groovy. You can each pick a friend to stay with until I can rent an apartment. And then we'll all live together. It'll all work out. And you might even have fun along the way. Well, having played the straight kid, I was like, I can't drop in and drop the hippie bomb on any of my friends. They don't know the fucking truth about me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, let me stay with Donna, your friend Donna. And she's like, Donna and I had a fight. I'm not getting along with Donna anymore. My mom didn't talk like that. She talked more like this. Donna and I didn't see eye to eye on something. And right now they're taking a pause in our relationship. But anyway, it was a no. So then I'm like, I don't know where to go. Let me stay with you and Charlie and I'll just sleep in the bus. And she was like, no, you can't do that either. So she goes, you're going to stay with my ex-boyfriend, Cliff, in his garage. So we drive over there. She goes in with some weed and I'm like being negotiated with pot right now. And sure enough, Cliff says, yeah, he can stay in the garage. And, they take an old couch that was in the backyard and put it in the garage. It gives me a blanket. And that's where I lived for the next 60-something days until she finally got her act together and rented an apartment. Yeah. So that was the significant story I started with. Then I kind of thought, well, I'll just go chronological. So I just kind of started with our past, like we discussed at the beginning, our Cincinnati straight roots and, all the little things I remembered along the way. And I remembered a lot. One of the things I learned from my mom was to keep a journal. Not a diary, that's for girls. I kept a journal and I was able to look back on it. Really bad stuff, like not just bad memories, but enough detail to bring me back to like what it felt like to be going through some of that stuff. So I'm really grateful I did that.
What kind of feelings did you have when you were reading that? Like just your deep, deep feelings? Because I go back and read mine every once in a while. And I get those just deep, like, man, I was in such a dark time in that place.
It sucks because, like patchouli oil can bring you back to Whole Earth Day. Those words can bring you back to some genuine pain. And the good thing is that unless you experience that level of discourse and pain and suffering, you're less likely to be sympathetic and empathetic to other people. Mm-hmm. Over time, it makes you stronger, but you sure don't get that at the time. You're just in a bad space. You don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So a lot of that's hard. And I keep finding letters because I took care of my dad and ended up with all his stuff before he passed away. So I've got letters to and from attorneys during the divorce and, letters between him and my mom, always about money. So it's just a lot of, Fortunately, I have a sense of humor, at least I think so. And so I was able to counterbalance a lot of the heavy stuff with my take on life, my survival tool. That and weed, I think, is what got me through it.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to laugh at the pain.
Yeah, yeah. My sister Chris was really good at reminding us about that. She would like make us talk about it and get it out in the open and get teased by your brothers and sisters to the point where you could finally laugh about it too. And then you were like, good. I finally reached that state where I can laugh.
Laugh and embrace and figure out a plan to get through it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what helps too. Like if you fully digest it, learn to laugh, and you can finally develop a plan to move on and move through.
I agree.
Um,
So what
oh,
did you think of the narration style? This is obviously the first book I've ever done.
I liked it. I really liked how you got into detail with all the characters, and you were so explicit with the details, how the day was going, what time it was, and all that kind of stuff. I really liked the narration of it.
I read the first half of the book, recording it, and my wife was editing the audio track before I found my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was mad. I'm like, I got to start over. I finally know the pace I should read at, the degree of emotion it should have. So that's been a good learning experience too. And I did audiobooks for the next two as well.
Mm-hmm. That it's. I really liked your voice too. I was a big fan of the tones and everything you used like that. Excuse me. So, how old were you when you moved into Cliff's garage?
So it was right before, let's see, I was 12. No, I was 13, turning 14. Um, my birthday got kind of overshadowed because we were all scattered and we weren't all living together. And then Christmas was rolling around, and my mom said, "We'll celebrate Christmas after Christmas when everything's on sale." So I was like, not looking forward to the holidays. And it actually
Yeah.
started this long term uh, anxiety that I associate. So before every Thanksgiving as a young adult, I would break up with whatever girl I was dating then because I couldn't fathom going through the holidays and having to deal with the struggles of my family, which I couldn't count on,
Mm-hmm.
and having to deal with, her family who might want to meet my family. And it was just like, that's it. I'm just going to break up. And finally, one girlfriend I managed to date and break up with said, "You do this every year, you know." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's kind of a thing you do." And then I thought about it and I'm like, "You're right. It is kind of a thing I do." I'm happily married now and happy to say that the holidays don't stress me out like they used to.
It's like, well, hey, I gotta save a lot of money here on the holidays. Like,
Yeah.
it's an expensive time of year. Um, you answered one of my questions, knowing your biological father,
hmm
and you said did you gather a lot of notes and a lot of letters. What letter stuck out to you the most?
Um, we were occasionally things got so tight that we got food deprived. I don't know what the
Mm-hmm.
right term is. We didn't have any food in the house, and it's really hard to go to school and when you're starving and you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a list to my dad. Actually, it was to my mom. I used a black Sharpie, and it was like black letters, all caps. "We need," followed by peanut butter. Black Sharpie again. "We need bread. We need cereal. We need milk. We need all this stuff." And she's all, "Why don't you," or I got home from school that day and she goes, "I mailed that letter to your father because he's late with child support again, and we wouldn't be in this predicament if your father would just pay on time." Well, he had to send all his payments through the court. That was just a lie. So she was using the money for other things, and it wasn't always going towards us.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad saved that letter. And as I was going through all his boxes and all his old slides and his travel articles, I found it, and I'm like, whoa, that's where I was, hungry,
Damn.
pissed off at the world, and here's a little time capsule to remind me of it.
Damn. That's
hmm
crazy. That's crazy. So, any other interesting things you found when you were going through your father's stuff? Things that stuck out.
Yeah, he was really. I should show you that picture again. He was like a good-looking guy. He did a lot of modeling that I didn't really find out until later in life. He's a catalog model. He modeled shirts, tennis equipment, socks, um, So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. I got my some good genes running through me. That was fun to find. Then I also found out that he had in college kind of a one-nighter with Rosemary Clooney. She came to perform in Milwaukee, and he was going to Marquette University at the time, and he was a journalist major. So he was selected to interview her. And when they were done and everybody was going their different ways, she grabbed his arm and said, "You remind me of one of my ex-boyfriends." And I would have never found this out, but my dad has some pictures of her. Mm-hmm. And he got remarried when he was in his 60s to a girl he went to college with. And she told me the truth. And I'm like, yeah, I wonder why he had pictures of Rosemary Clooney. There's, of course, the picture that was in the paper, and he's just looking at her. But then there's pictures that aren't really, weren't her headshots or anything.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That was fine. What else? Dad stuff. He's got a baseball. He worked for the Boston Red Sox for a few years as a photographer. He covered the team in spring training in Florida. He became friends with a lot of the players. I got to go to my first baseball game at Fenway Park. His keepsake was a signed ball by Ted Williams, who was a batting coach at the time in the 80s. And as a kid, he loved Ted Williams and would talk about him. I didn't know enough about baseball to really understand until later in life. And then I saw, maybe this is my retirement. I don't have to work anymore. How much is this baseball worth? About $7 because he signed so many of them. And it's autographed to Tom. But that was kind of a good thing to find too.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. How long was your mother and John married for?
I think it was 6 years. I think they made it about 6. Their wedding was like a non-event. We lived next door to some Filipino girls, and they'd take turns babysitting us. Yori was babysitting us when they left for a day, and they came back and just announced they were married. And we were like, married? She was like, married. And she held up her ring and didn't have a diamond or anything. It was just a band. But they decided to let us look at it. And then my sister Shelly looked at it and she's like, it says animal on the inside. What's that mean? It was probably their pet sexual name for each other.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Interesting.
That information got revealed very, very early in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. John really never showed any emotion, just anger. He was just a really hard guy to live with. Mm-hmm. And he softened up later in life. He's my half brother's dad. So I saw him, after the divorce and everything. He even apologized once, but I'm like, dude, it's almost something you can't apologize for. It's just like, why be so mean to these adorable kids who are just so eager to please you, and we can't do anything right. He told my sister Chris and I one time we got back from Gemco, and he was like, put the perishables away first. I looked at my sister and I'm like, I don't really know what perishables are. Do you? I have no idea. So we're slowly putting away stuff, and he comes in and he's all mad and he's like, you're idiots, and instead of just teaching us what the word meant and moving on, he had to belittle us and make us feel bad. So maybe I learned to be a good parent by having such a harsh parent.
Yeah.
It was just definitely too strict.
Mm-hmm. You definitely take in things that you don't want to do, like what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So,
same with my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, teaching independence is good and self-sufficiency, but man, once you have kids, it really shines a light on how radical my childhood was, because there's just things I would never put my kids through. Mm-hmm. I don't really have any hard feelings. I feel lucky that I came from Mare. Mm-hmm. She's my mom, and she's this beautiful person and fiercely independent, and come to like who I am finally in life. And I go, I just wouldn't be here. There'd be no story without her. Mm-hmm. She's really the driving force that took the family through all those changes.
So I got two final questions. The part of the story where you peed on your brother.
Sibling rivalry, you know,
do
getting
you
all
do
the
you,
attention.
do you and your brother still talk about that?
Yeah, of course we have to laugh about that. Not
Yeah.
every time we see each other, but sure it comes up. He has a good sense of humor. He's a great guy. In the
Mm-hmm.
book, he sort of evolves into this animal lover. He's an animal lover at the start. But there's some great stories about. He has a very kind heart. But yeah, that was just a situation where I'm like, big deal. He rolled over,
Yeah.
everybody came over, had a gift for him, and I just got jealous. And he couldn't talk yet, but he knew this was like an act of terror. This was a terrorist act. He screamed louder than I ever heard him scream before. And he was pointing at me, and I had to try to stop midstream, and I got busted, and I got spanked by John, and I got yelled at by my mom, and but it was funny as hell.
I have a brother that's a year and a month, or no, yeah, about 11 months younger than me, and we always had those sibling rivalries too.
Yeah.
And it's
Alex wasn't close enough in age to me growing up for me to allow him to tag along, because I think there's a 3.5 year difference.
mm-hmm.
So when you're 11, 12, 13, you're like, forget it. You're a pain in the ass. But he survived.
Mm-hmm.
He went out with his own friends. It was pretty normal to, abuse your siblings that way. But growing up wasn't out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. And my final question is, do you still hula hoop?
I do. Do you mind if I just plug my social media a bit?
Absolutely. Plug whatever you want.
Okay. So you should follow me on Instagram, because I hula hoop and I juggle and I handstand on a skateboard, and I show some mad skills for an old man. I am at Tom.Bross, Bross, and on Facebook I'm Tom J. Bross, author. Not a lot of Brosses out there, so if you look for me, you'll find me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on my next book. I took a break to do some marketing on these three, but then it just started welling up inside of me. And the next book takes place at a lodge I worked at in my formative teen years, called the Evergreen Lodge. It's right outside the west gate of Yosemite. These were magical summers in those years where somebody can just play a new song for you and blow your mind. And the world was new, and you were young, and you were an idiot. You made a lot of mistakes, and there's girl stories, and it's just going to be a lot lighter in content. Funny, a lot of funny stories, but not quite the the dysfunctional family theater that books 1, 2, and 3 are.
Mm-hmm. So I'm an hour into this book, and like I said, and I really want to get you on the podcast and talk to you about this. And would you be cool with coming back on?
Oh, I would love it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Just whenever you feel you need to ask the next set of questions, that's fine with me.
That would be great. And I would definitely link all of your material in the show notes.
Awesome.
I really like just how this book opened and where it has gone so far. It is a wild and fascinating story.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast, and I can't wait to have you back on.
Me too. It'll be fun.
Thank you, sir, and you have a great night.
You too. Nice talking to you.
You too. Bye.